Yo, my name's Joey. Last year, I quit my 9 to 5 software job to build web apps. So let's build one together. All right, last video, we talked about how exactly web apps work. In this video, we'll go ahead and build one start to finish completely from scratch. And we'll use the same tools and setup that we talked about in that video. We'll set up a front end using React and Vite. We'll set up our backend database using Google's BigQuery, and then we'll set up our API in Google's Cloud Run. Let's do it. Okay, so the first step in making a web app is figuring out what to make. For the sake of this video, I'm going to make like a simple action list or planning tool. So like rather than using something like Excel or buying something like Microsoft Planner, you just make your own. Okay, first step, we're going to want to go to GitHub. And if you don't have an account, go ahead and sign up and make one. Otherwise, log into your GitHub account, and then you're going to want to create a repository for your new app. Your repository will hold all of the folders and files that has all the code to make the app actually work. You'll just go ahead and make it whatever name you want. I'll make it just app. And then we'll scroll down and create repository. And you're going to want to create a new file. There has to be one file. It doesn't matter what it is. I'll just make it delete.txt. You need a file in your repo in order to open code spaces, which is what we're about to do. So then you'll go to code spaces. And then once code space opens, you're going to want to run this command, npm create Vite at latest. And this is going to install the framework for React and Vite. So this will install all the initial files you need in order to start building out your front end. You'll remove existing files and continue, so it gets rid of that delete file. You will select React. And then it doesn't really matter. We're going to use JavaScript for this, and then we'll install with npm and start now. Now, this is all installed. We can now proceed to Cloudflare and host our GitHub repo on Cloudflare. This lets you safely deploy your app, and it allows anyone to access it publicly. So you're going to log into Cloudflare, create an account if you don't have one already. And after that gets created, you're going to want to connect it to your GitHub. So you'll follow that process. And then once it gets connected to your GitHub, you will go to workers and pages in Cloudflare, hit create application, and then you'll hit get started with a new page. You'll import a repo, go down, and then your repository will be auto-selected if it's the only one you have. Otherwise, you'll select the right one, hit begin setup, and then under framework preset, just make sure you select React Vite, and then save and deploy. Then after you deploy, go back to your code spaces and run these commands. This will commit and push all the files that you created for React to your repo. And then in Cloudflare, there'll be a new deployment with all those new files. And then you could go to the domain that Cloudflare automatically creates for you. And when you go to that domain, you'll see that you have pretty much an empty app with nothing built yet. But now you know that it's set up correctly and you can proceed. Okay, next, we want to set up Google Cloud and create our first project for the app. Again, we'll be using Google Cloud for both our backend to hold our data with BigQuery, and then we'll be hosting our API with Google's Cloud Run. So once you create your project, name it whatever you want, go to BigQuery. And then once you are in BigQuery, on the side here, you'll just find your project, and you'll hit these three dots and create a data set. Name the data set whatever you would like. I'm just going to name it app. and then create the data set. At this point, you're done with the initial setup. You've created your GitHub repo, you've installed the React and Vite files, and you host it on Cloudflare. You also created your Google Cloud project to host all your backend and your API. Now we can actually start building the app with AI. All right, we're using ChatGPT just to make this as simple as possible. And then your prompt should be something like, "Hi, I want to build a simple planner actionless web app." The app should be pretty straightforward. I want to create, edit, and delete action items. Each action item should have fields like title, description, category, priority, status, person to assign it to, due dates, etc., and anything else that you think be helpful for a tool like this. I've already set up my GitHub repo with React and Vite using JavaScript and hosted on Cloudflare. So the front end is ready. For the back end, I want to use my Google Cloud project, which is equal to app140330, and I'll use BigQuery to store the data with dataset equal to app. I'll use Cloud Run to host my API. I want you to help me build the API entirely in G Shell. This is a brand new Google Cloud project, so I want to make sure we properly set up everything from the beginning, like our APIs, permissions, etc., so we don't have any issues when deploying and working on it. Can you guide me through this step by step and help me build it cleanly? Please give me steps one at a time, or at least slowly in case I have issues. Let's start building the front end while getting it wired up for our API and our BigQuery data. All right, so AI will do its thinking and give you a response here. ChatGPT gave me more of an overview and some steps I didn't want, so I just said, "Hey, can you please just give me the files I need for my front end?" Okay, so first, ChatGPT gave me the file structure with all the names of the folders and the file names in each of those folders. So I'm going to go to my repo in GitHub. And one tip, if you go to your repo and you press the period on the keyboard, it opens Visual Studio Code, which makes it much better for you to edit the code. So I'm pretty much just copying the file structure that it gave me in ChatGPT. And then once you're done copying the file structure, you'll actually copy the code for each file and just paste it in each file in your GitHub repo. Now, once you are finished moving all the files from ChatGPT into your repo in GitHub, you can commit the changes and push them through. After you push them through, you'll go to Cloudflare and you'll see that there'll be a new deployment with all your new files. After that gets deployed, you could go to the domain that's automatically created by Cloudflare and see what your app looks like. So here, opening it, and it looks good. It's a basic, clean-looking planner app with everything that I asked for. It has the ability to create action items, and then on the side, we could filter by and search for all the action items that we create. Obviously, it doesn't actually work because it's not tied to any backend data or an API to connect it to a backend. So we'll proceed and we'll set that stuff up and make this thing actually functional. All right, now our front end is all good to go. We will want to ask ChatGPT to help us set up our table in BigQuery to hold our data for the front end. So here, all I'm doing is asking ChatGPT to give me the SQL to make the table in BigQuery. So now ChatGPT gives us two pieces of SQL. The first will create our table, and the second will actually give us some test records to insert into the table. Okay, so we go to BigQuery, and then we're going to open a new window, and then we'll paste that first block of SQL that ChatGPT gave us in there, and then we'll run it. And this, again, will create our table that we need to hold all our data for our front end. Now, this will run. After it runs, we could see in the bottom left here that the table tasks was created in our data set. And we see all the columns in that table. And now what we'll want to do next is we'll want to open another window and then copy and paste that second block of SQL that ChatGPT gave us. Now, this will insert records into that table so that when we test our front end for the first time, to actually see some action items in the app. Now, at this moment, after you run this, you're going to run into a small hurdle. It's going to tell you that billing has not been set up for the project. So all you have to do is go through the processes to set up billing. And then just one call out here is that Google Cloud is really cheap. For like the first 90 days, it's free. And then if you're creating an app, even multiple apps, it's going to be essentially free. Maybe you'll pay 50 cents a month, but you're charged for how much data you store. And this is meant for like big companies. So unless you have like thousands and thousands and thousands of rows of data, you're going to be paying nothing for this. Okay, so once you finish setting up billing for your project, you could go ahead and rerun that SQL that will insert the records into the table. Now we have a table that will hold our data and some test data in it. Now it's time to set up our APIs so that our front end can be connected with this table in our backend. Going back to ChatGPT, we will ask ChatGPT to give us all the G shell commands to get our API deployed. And then make sure you tell ChatGPT that this is a brand new Google project and that we have to set up all the permissions and enable all the APIs. Because if you continue and you don't set all of this up, you're going to just run into a bunch of errors and you can just handle them all up front. So right now, ChatGPT gives us all these commands to run in the G shell. G shell is just Google's terminal that, like how we did before, just lets you build things quicker by just running commands. Okay, so now we will go back to Google Cloud Console and we will activate the Cloud Shell. This will open our terminal. You're going to be prompted to verify your account. This is, again, you just created a brand new Google Cloud account. So you'll go through this process. And then once you're done verifying your account, you'll go back to ChatGPT and then you'll just start copying and pasting all the commands that AI gave you into the terminal. Again, these first set of commands that ChatGPT will give you is just going to make sure that we set up our APIs and then make sure that we create everything we need as far as permissions go. So go through and just copy and paste everything. If you run into errors, just copy and paste the error back to ChatGPT. It's going to give you another command to resolve it. Now, after you finish with the first set of commands, you'll get a second set of commands from ChatGPT, and you'll follow the same exact process. You'll just copy and paste them all in the terminal, and these commands will actually create and deploy your API. Again, once you have this API deployed, it will allow the data in your table in BigQuery that you just created to go back and forth between your actual front end so that you have a working app. Now, after you deploy it, your last command will be to actually test it. If you run that test command and you see all the data returned back to you that's in your table, you know it's working. You also go to Cloud Run in the Google console, and you could actually see your API deployed with all the revisions and source code if you ever need to troubleshoot. Now you have created everything you need. You have your front end, your back end, your API. Now it's time to test. So here I went back to my app and I did see that there were still issues. The first time you deploy an API, odds are you're going to have some issues. Not all the time, but it's going to happen that you're going to have problems that you're going to need to send back to ChatGPT and you're going to have to work through. So here I just opened the developer console and I saw the API. I saw that it failed and I screenshotted that and sent that to ChatGPT. And then you'll just continue to replace files as needed until finally it works. Finally, after some troubleshooting, we have a fully functional and working app. I'll go ahead and test it for you just to show you how it works. So we pull in the data from our table. We can create a new task, which should send more data to the table when we create it. So when we create task, we can see that we have the new action item. And then when we look in our table, we can see that a new record for that task has made its way into the table. We go back, we test deleting, and then same concept, we go back to our table and see that that data is gone. And then we go back and test editing an existing app just to make sure that the fields in the table are updated like we updated them in our front end. And update that task, go back to the table and see everything's looking good. So fully functional, we have completed an app. We made our front end, our back end, and our API to connect the front end with our back end. All right, we built a web app. And as you can see, building web applications is not that difficult, especially if you understand what you need to make them actually work. I will say that in 2026, right now, the method that I showed you in this video is definitely not the most efficient, but I wanted to do it this way just so that you can see that you don't need to pay a bunch of money for these, coding AI tools. And also doing it this way gives you a better understanding of like all the pieces as you put them together. In upcoming videos, I'm gonna post building web apps with tools like Claude Code, which makes it much quicker. So just keep on a lookout for those videos. Nonetheless, thanks for watching. Peace.